Ta-da! Hello! If you're new here, my name is Marlaina. I go by Marlaina the Pottery Lady because I absolutely love pottery. I am a full-time potter. It makes my life so much better. And my goal with YouTube is to help it make your life so much better too. Today, we're diving into something very important if you are a beginner potter, intermediate potter, advanced potter, or genuinely just want your pieces to be more consistent. Especially if you're working on anything like soap dispensers, olive oil dispensers, jar lids, things that fit a cork, other things with lids, anything that you want to fit apart or be a specific size, because today we're talking about shrinkage. Yes, clay shrinkage. And I know when you were a student or a beginner potter, you were just told to make things bigger and they will kind of end up to be what you expect. And if you make the thing the size that you want it to be starting out, when it's all done, it will come back as a tiny miniature version. So here's the thing. I know you probably already know this, but clay shrinks all throughout the process. The drying process, the first firing process, and the second firing. It can shrink 10 to 20%, and that's quite a bit. I know you probably have a story of you thinking that your piece was gonna be this great big coffee mug, great big soup bowl, and it probably came back to you being a dinky little teacup. I know that that happened to me in the beginning quite a lot. So why does clay shrink? And you might already know this, but it's obviously because of the water in the clay. And the reason that it shrinks during the drying is because the water evaporates, it gets a little bit smaller. In the bisque and in the glaze firing, more organic matter and all of that water evaporates out, bringing those clay particles closer together, and this is called vitrification. Those clay particles getting closer together, making the clay more compact, makes the clay vitrified, and that basically meaning that it's not porous anymore. Clay that doesn't have glaze on it will always be a little bit porous, but that is the reason it shrinks. So then you might already be able to surmise that the more water in your clay, the more that it shrinks. And dependent on the type of clay that you're using, definitely impacts how much it shrinks. I say this because it's important to remember if you are using reclaimed clay that you have rehydrated yourself and is very wet, fairly wet, I don't know what I'm saying, that's very wet, it's going to shrink more than if you're using your clay right out of the bag, right out of the supplier's box, and plopping that on the wheel. That's probably gonna shrink less. However, if you're getting these nice, purified, wonderful bags of clay from your supplier, they have a website with the clay type and with the shrinkage rate listed, which is amazing. This is the clay that I get. This clay is a cone 6, meaning it becomes fully vitrified at cone 6, which is where I like to fire, and it shrinks at a 12% shrinkage rate, which is the most common. But if you want to make sure, I recommend go to your supplier's website, look up the clay body, and find out that exact shrinkage rate. If you somehow harvest your own wild clay, there is way more purification that needs to be happening, way more testing that needs to be happening, and I have no idea your wild clay's shrinkage rate, and that is going to have to come with much testing. All right, so let's talk about solutions. How do you find out your clay's shrinkage rate in real, tangible, physical evidence as opposed to just looking at that 12% number on the website? The first is a clay ruler. One, you can actually buy a clay ruler on Amazon. It looks like this, looks just like a ruler, except those measurements are the shrinked measurements. And if you measure with the clay ruler and you make it up to that mark on that ruler, it will shrink to be an actual 5 inches. Another version of the clay ruler is to roll out a slab, make the marks as perfectly lined up with a real ruler, and then fire that clay ruler, and then line it up with your real ruler, and then see how much it shrunk. However, the reason why I don't really love clay rulers is because they make it seem like clay only shrinks on that long height plane, when really it shrinks in the whole entire circumference of a pot. So let's say you make a really tiny little opening, little tiny little spout at the top of a vase. If you make that too small and it goes in the kiln and you go through the glazing and everything process, that will shrink, the glaze will clog it up, and it actually won't be an open neck anymore, it would actually be closed. And I'm sure you might have experienced this with little tiny holes in your berry bowl colanders getting clogged up and too small. A throwing gauge looks like this. Production potters love these. They basically just allow consistency by providing measurements on the wheel. I don't use this, I have never used this, but just in case you were wondering what that is, that's what it's called and that's what it's for. However, I feel like I can't really offer advice on how exactly to use it because I don't have one. And lastly, the shrinkage formula, which is right here. And I will explain it. Let's say your shrinkage rate is 12%, like my clay. First, you want to find your desired final size of the opening. And since we're going to be doing soap pumps today, this is the final desired size that I'll want at the top because this is the thread that the soap pump screws onto. You don't have to get these threads. There are actually tools that you can put the thread on the clay, which we can explore a little bit when we dive into the making of the soap pumps. So in this equation, the first number is 1 because I want my opening to be 1 inch. Then you want your shrinkage rate in decimal form. To find the 12% in decimal form, all you gotta do is 12% is 0.12, right? For 8% it would be 0.8. So to find your decimal version of your percent, it would be 1 minus 0.12. And that is equal to 0.88. And listen, I struggled a lot in math class and I can do this, so you can do it too. So using that, the final measurement of our opening for our bottle will be 1.13 of an inch. You can do this with any number, of course. If you want it to be 6 inches wide or whatever, you take this exact formula and you can take a screenshot if it helps you. And I hope the way I explained it was simple and useful, because how you apply this to your pieces will absolutely change your confidence in being able to repeat something or making something fit. And I'm telling you, it is a game changer. So with that theme, I encourage you to stick around to see how we make this soap pump bottle, because to see these things in application totally simplifies it down so much. And I think that it can seem cloudy, especially if like numbers can be intimidating to some people. I know it's not for everyone, but for me, I love the practical application of this technique. Totally simplifies it down and makes it seem manageable. One last way to do this, and I don't want to encourage you to always use ChatGPT for everything, but you can ask ChatGPT this question, which is, what number minus 12% equals X? Your number, 1 inch, 6 inches, whatever, right? So you could do that if you want. And we are going to throw a soap dispenser now. Let's go. Now into the application of this. First you'll want your ruler, and then you have your thread. So just to show you, we have 1 inch, and then we have the outer ring of this thread lining up exactly at that inch. Olive oil dispenser, same process as our soap pump. These are 2 of my favorite styles right now, and we're gonna throw 2 of them in 2 different styles just so you get a good idea. You can get these types of hardware, thread, pump, stick thing from really a lot of places. The place that I got mine is a website called One Dream Design, and I can link that down below. But you can also go to like DHgate and other drop shipping sites, and they will also have these. So remember, find your shrinkage rate and get your desired measurement, and then through doing that little calculation, you'll be able to tell how big you actually need to throw it. My clay is 12% shrinkage, so we're going to make the opening 1.13 of an inch, and it should work perfectly. Got 2 balls I like to experiment with how big I really want them. You don't have to necessarily make them any size in terms of like tall and, you know, the bottom, how wide. The tube thing, I believe, is like 5 inches or 6 inches max. So I wouldn't make it like huge, because then the tube that gets out the soap will go all the way to the bottom. But I always have to cut mine. This is about 2.5 pounds. We also have our handy dandy new little setup so that you can see what I'm doing in more detail, because it's always hard to get a good angle with one camera. So I hope this helps you guys. Clean her off, smack her on. I'm going to speed past the centering of this because I am guessing none of you guys are really beginners. Otherwise, I don't think you would be pursuing this question. So for these, I like to get pretty close to the bottom because I'm not going to be doing a ton of trimming because this is a bottle shape. I don't do a ton of trimming on bottles. Of course, to each their own, but that is why I'm going real far down, about, you know, 1/4 of an inch, no, less than that. Here, I'll show you how much I have at the bottom. Do this, line up your fingies. I have about, you see the tip, you see the difference? That is how thick my bottom is. And then I really like to get a lot of use, a lot of, you know, can hold a lot of hand soap. So I'm making sure to really get this corner and have a right angle here so that it can hold a lot. If you have a flat, good right angle and not a bunch of clay clogged up right here, not a thick corner right here, you know, it'll be less heavy and it'll hold more. Refocus that center, it's gonna flare. You guys know this. Good pull. Now that we have a good cylinder, I'm gonna start to create the belly and create the shape. For this first one, I'm gonna do a pretty simple shape because I wanna do some cool carving textures on it later. But the main point is just getting that good shape, good even walls, good belly, and the correct size. Sometimes when I create my belly and then I create the neck, I want to fix the belly, and then it would be such an annoying thing to go down the neck and stretch it out again. So this little extendo stick, it's great. Obviously, once you collar your neck in, it's going to get thicker because that clay has, you know, less space to cover, so it will get thicker. And then you can do more pulls just right on that neck to make it taller. And obviously cut the top off because it's uneven now. I love to have extra clay to work with. You can always cut it off. Can't add it on. Well, yeah, you can, but we're not going to in this case. So we're going to put the threads lining up on here. So it's not the hole that needs to be 1 inch, it's the entire diameter here. That looks just about perfect. So you see how it's lining up here, there's where our inches, which is where it'll shrink, and right now it's about there. I guess I could make it a little tighter, but we have some wiggle room. You always have a little wiggle room. Now I'm just pushing this top down a little bit with my finger because we want that surface area not to be too small for our epoxy and the threads. Finishing touches. This obviously is going to go through a lot more after this because now that we have our correct measurement, beautiful belly shape, nice big bottom, good base for now, we're going to cut her off, let her dry for about a day, and then I'm gonna go back and trim her up. Once that is trimmed up, it's bisque fired, you're gonna glaze it, and here's the important note, please remember, it really helps that you do not glaze this part, the rim right here, because the epoxy, which you need to use epoxy by the way, because epoxy turns into an inert plastic when it is properly cured, which will really adhere those things. It will not come off. It is also food safe for the olive oil dispensers, and then epoxy sticks much better on the surface that is not glazed, on the raw clay. So don't glaze the very rim right here. Ta-da. Welcome to a few weeks ago where I was doing these soap dispensers in my old studio so you can see the ending part of the process. Most of these are going to be soap dispensers. So what's great about the soap is that once you have the bottle, you just cut the tube to size. So I'd probably just like cut that much off, and then you pop it on and pop the rest, screw it on, bada bing, bada boom. It's not that complicated. Okay. Are you kidding me? The knob finishes the whole thing so well. Like, it just adds this absolutely beautiful finished touch. This is called a bird's head knob, I believe, and it is gorgeous. I got a couple colors. I want to show you how I do the whole thing and finish them up. All right, so let's pick a pump for this guy. This might go, I was gonna say silver or gold because the sand goes well with warm tones. This could go well with a cool tone, but since there's some green in it, I actually think that this one is the one to do. I have been using the cutoffs of other ones to see if they fit shorter ones, so we don't waste anything. So I push it to the edge, line this up with this. This goes down pretty far. You make the tube go in really tight. So I'm gonna take a little bit off of this. I definitely don't want the tube to be too short, and so you're wasting the soap that you refill in here. But, put it on. I feel it's like pushing up against the bottom, so it's a little long still because I can't screw it all the way on. Perfect, beautiful, fits, screws on, and I really like this pump with this color. Second one done. My camera died, so we have these two done and completed, and it's honestly okay. I'm sure you didn't need a recap of the second bottle, and plus we're gonna go over different kinds of soap dispensers and how to do that with different kinds of necks in another video. I just want to emphasize that you can do this. You absolutely can. This is it thrown. This is about-ish what it's going to look like when it's finished. Art is so important, and so are you, my friends. So we will see you in the next one.